All right, today we're diving into a really radical idea about DNA. What if the code of life isn't just some random accident, but actually a masterpiece of mathematical design? We're going to unpack a fascinating model that explains how this vast world of genetic possibility gets compressed into the precise reality of a living, breathing organism. So let's just jump right in with a massive question, one that scientists have been wrestling with for decades. Is the genetic code, the fundamental language that builds every single living thing, is it all just the result of some lucky, random fluke in our deep evolutionary past?
Well, the source material we're digging into today offers a pretty shocking alternative. It argues that the genetic code is anything but random. Instead, it suggests that life is actually built on a hidden mathematical architecture, almost like a geometric blueprint. It's a wild idea, so let's explore it.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this hidden geometry, our source introduces a really powerful metaphor, the hourglass model. Think of it as a way of visualizing the entire journey from raw genetic information all the way to a fully formed organism. And, what's so powerful about this hourglass idea is that it's more than just a nice picture. It's actually describing a real process, the compression of this huge, almost infinite universe of genetic possibilities into this specific functional instructions that make life work. And this slide lays it out perfectly. It shows you the two sides of that journey. You've got the north, the top of the hourglass, which is all about vast, endless potential, kind of like a chaotic space of combinations. And then there's the south, the bottom, and that's where all that potential gets filtered down into something stable, functional, and coherent. It's the journey from raw data to meaningful life. All right, so let's start at the top of that hourglass in what our source calls the realm of possibility. This is where we're dealing with the raw, unfiltered potential of the entire genetic code. The first key number you gotta know is 64. This represents the total number of possible three-letter words, or codons, that you can make from DNA's four-letter alphabet. It's the entire combinatorial space for a single strand of DNA. But of course, DNA isn't just one strand, right? It's that classic double helix. So when you consider both the codon and its complementary partner, the anticodon, that informational space actually doubles. The full raw potential is really 128 distinct states. This table here really breaks it down for us. You can see exactly how we get to those numbers. We kick things off with 64 possible states for a single DNA strand. But since DNA is a double helix, you have to account for both sides, which gets us to that grand total of 128 states. This is the raw, unfiltered data of life. Okay, so now let's travel down the hourglass to the south, where all that raw data gets refined. This section is called the harvest of function, and it's where real meaning starts to emerge from all that noise. So here's the crucial idea: subtractive logic. Instead of adding more information to get complexity, the system works by removing whatever isn't necessary. It's kind of like a sculptor who starts with a giant block of marble and just chips away everything that isn't the statue. It's all about canceling out the noise to find the signal. And after all that filtering, all that chipping away, what are we left with? We're left with this one incredibly important number, 21. Think about that. From 64 initial possibilities, we end up with just 21 outcomes. That's a huge, huge compression of information. So, what exactly is this number 21? Well, as you can see here, it represents the complete set of instructions for building proteins. You have the 20 amino acids, which are the literal building blocks of life, plus one essential stop command that tells the cellular machinery, okay, you're done, the protein is complete. That's it. All the incredible complexity of life built from just 21 core meanings. Okay, so that's the big question, right? How in the world does this incredible transformation happen? How do you get from 64 down to 21? Well, this brings us to the narrowest part of the hourglass, that pivot point where raw possibility becomes reality. The source calls this mechanism the master code. And the key thing to get here is that this isn't just abstract math. It's grounded in the real world, in physics. Each genetic pairing is given a value based on its physical properties, its atomic mass. This creates a system of checks and balances that makes sure the whole structure is perfectly stable. So why is this master code so brilliant? Well, it brings three huge benefits to the table. First, it creates this perfect balance and equilibrium between all the raw genetic data and the final instructions for building an organism. Second, it introduces this beautiful symmetry with 21 positive and 21 negative states that perfectly mirror the two strands of the DNA double helix. And finally, it's the engine of that incredible compression we talked about, narrowing 128 possibilities down to the 42 essential balance states that life needs to work.
All right, let's bring it all home. This final section pulls everything we've talked about into one single unified model for how the genetic code actually works. So when you boil it all down, you're left with these four essential pillars of our genetic architecture. You start with 64 possible states. That expands to 128 when you look at the full double helix. Then, that massive potential gets compressed down to just 21 functional meanings. And finally, the whole thing is held together by this principle of global symmetry. It basically means that across the entire genome, all the informational forces have to cancel each other out, like weights on a perfectly balanced scale. It's this equilibrium that creates a stable system. It's what allows life to even exist.
And I think this final quote from our source just says it all, doesn't it? It reframes the genetic code not as a product of random chance, but as a masterpiece of informational architecture. It asks us to think about the possibility that life emerges not from chaos, but from some profound and universal geometric law woven right into the fabric of our atoms. That is a truly fascinating thought to end on.